Hello and welcome to Autocar Dialogues. Today we have a very interesting guest who is going to be talking about a very contentious issue, which is ethanol or the rollout of E20. Now we know a lot of our readers have had concerns with this, and we are going to be addressing some of these with none other than the Director General of the Indian Sugar and Bioenergy Manufacturers Association, ISMA, and that is Deepak Ballani, the Director General of ISMA, talking to us. Mr. Ballani, thanks very much for speaking to us. Just to start off straight away, there's a lot of debate around India's ethanol roadmap right now. From overcapacity to consumer readiness. Let's start where things stand today. So, just your thoughts on that.
Thank you for having me in your wonderful show. It's a privilege for me to be in your program. On the ethanol ecosystem, we know that we already have a capacity today, both the sugar and the grain, to produce almost 2,000 crore liter of ethanol. And this is all because of the very supportive policies of the government. If we go back to 2018-19, when the government rolled out the ethanol blending program with a roadmap by Niti Aayog, and also a lot of incentives which were given by the government, including the interest subvention, a lot of push from the government to put up the capacities, specifically because we have surplus feedstock for both sugar and the grain. And the capacity, because of such policies, the industry has put up the capacities, and we are looking at almost 2,000 crore liter of capacity today, and with around 400 crore liter capacity coming up next year. So that's a huge capacity. And having that kind of a production potential, the consumption at the moment because of E20 stands at almost 1,100 crore liter. That eventually means that only of our 50% capacity is going to be used. That means most of the distilleries in the country will run under capacity, which is economically not viable for the industry. And perhaps this is, we understand, specifically during this crisis time when we are seeing the West Asia crisis and how this is affecting our ability of getting the crude. I believe if we could have thought of a policy which could have taken the blending percentage or maybe something which could have enhanced the ethanol consumption beyond E20, I believe we could have less import of crude and less dependence. So the issue stands at 20%, but we are looking at the government and are in discussion how to really see that we can use our capacities and help the country.
Right. Mr. Ballani, how did we get to this, let's say overcapacity? It's almost double. I think our current consumption is about 1,100 crore liters. And so was there just an expectation? And, so because, what can you do with the surplus capacity? Is there potential for exports in the interim? Because clearly, you have to think of the readiness of the auto industry and consumers as well.
See, as I said, the government basically because of the program and because of very conducive policies way back in 18-19, the industry started putting up the capacities, hoping that the consumption will increase. Nobody expected actually 3 to 4 years back that we will have a capacity of 2,000, 2,400 crore liter. This is also because of a lot of push for other feedstocks. Sugar was definitely a more traditional and more stable feedstock because we always have produced more sugar. So we had a lot of feedstock. But the incentive which was given to, for example, maize way back in 2023 also pushed up a lot of capacities. So I believe people started putting up the capacities and somewhere the policy didn't follow. And we are looking at a situation where the consumption is only about 50% of the capacity. And that's a very big problem. Having said that, definitely, see, export is definitely one option, but we have to understand that the ethanol which we produce in India, the feedstock prices of the ethanol is decided by the government. For example, sugarcane, there is something called FRP, which is a fair and remunerative price, which is the cost which the producer has to pay to the farmer for getting the sugarcane. And that's actually decided year-on-year basis by the government. And let me tell you, we are in the world, we pay the highest for our sugarcane to the farmer.
Right.
So that means if my sugarcane feedstock is around 75% of my cost of production, I really can't help and lower the cost of the ethanol because it completely depends on the feedstock. So eventually, if you compare to, for example, US
Yes.
corn
Yeah,
ethanol,
let's
which
talk
is
about corn over there. Exactly.
yeah,
It might
so
be
it's
cheaper to import corn, because at this pricing. Yeah.
yeah, so see, basically, US is a GM corn, and GM corn has a better yield. It is not governed by something called MSP or an FRP, definitely. So their ethanol is definitely slightly cheaper because they don't have a regulation of FRP or MSP. Ours are expensive because we give higher payment to our farmers. That's why export is at the moment not viable because the countries which will import can get a cheaper ethanol, for example, from US than India. So
Right.
perhaps we should try and use our ethanol in the country itself because
Right.
one is that it is directly helping our farmers. See, we were
Right.
always very against importing ethanol to the country because the very foundation of ethanol is to reduce the import of crude and also help our farmers. So
Right.
both the things could only be met if we produce our own ethanol and not really import. And that is exactly what government has done. I'm very happy that they have not really got into this with the US or any other country in the FTS.
Right. But Mr. Balani, the price of the feedstock really that seems to be the issue because I would say is ethanol now about 70 to 75 rupees a liter. I believe that's what the cost is because of that some probably the most expensive around. So it's really I mean, to be honest, the farmers are being supported, but the motorists, the huge population of two-wheeler owners, they are all being impacted by the high prices, which obviously then have a cascading effect, and there's been no reduction in fuel prices at all.
Absolutely. You see, we are talking from the context when the crude was $64 a barrel.
Right.
Then definitely there was a thinking that ethanol is expensive. Ethanol, the weighted average cost of ethanol, because we have 6 or 7 feedstock from where ethanol is being made. The weighted
Right.
average cost is around 67 rupees per liter.
Right.
And obviously, if we go back a month back before the war, definitely crude was 60, 64, but we are looking at a crude of 100, 120. And this is
Right.
something which will keep on changing depending on the geopolitical situations.
Right.
Even if you take, for example, cost of ethanol at 67 or 70 rupees with
Right.
a 5% GST, which is basically on E20, the
Right.
ethanol component attracts 5% GST.
Right.
Even if we take 5% GST, and for example, if we have E100, where it is around 93% ethanol, like what we have in Brazil,
From Brazil, yeah.
if the GST could be a 5% and at 70 rupees with 5% GST and dealer margin, I think the fuel should be around 80, 82 rupees, which is definitely much attractive than the
Correct.
normal E20 or a petrol. So
Right.
I completely agree with you that for this to go forward, specifically the E100 in the flex fuel vehicle, there has to be two things which has to be done. One is the cost of ownership of the flexi fuel vehicle, because making the flexi fuel vehicle is slightly more expensive than the ICE engine. So
And
if the
the fuel
GST
efficiency also is
and the
gets
fuel,
hit.
because we need to compensate for the loss in fuel efficiency, definitely there has to be a differential pricing between E100 and the E20 petrol. So I think if the government is able to rationalize GST on E100, and we can then bring the cost of E100 fuel from, for example, 95 to around 80, 82 rupees, and with a flex fuel engine, costing the same as ICE engine, I think things can really move beyond.
Right. So no, Mr. Balani, I just want to talk to you. They've been pushing E20. To be honest, it hasn't been smooth. Many consumers are reporting lower fuel efficiency. There are concerns about wear and tear in older vehicles. These are challenges, and to push forward. A key question is, I mean, obviously, flex fuel vehicles is the way forward. Do you think the base fuel for now should remain at E20, where we just stabilized on it? Because otherwise it'll mean huge recalibration again, concerns about increased wear and tear, lower fuel efficiency. So a situation of E20 and maybe going to flex fuel of E85, that would seem to balance everyone's concerns, including your concerns. But The push for flex fuel vehicles, people are talking about it, but there are no policies. There's no fiscal incentive yet. A sense one gets is honestly, the government has put all this capacity, but hasn't rolled out a proper policy for flex fuel vehicles that make it attractive for both the OEMs to make them in terms of, let's say taxation benefits or a pricing, let's say kind of mechanism, which, as you said, would be much cheaper for the consumers to go in for flex fuel vehicles.
Well, I believe government has now finally realized that the flex fuel vehicle, definitely the policies have to come in. And in last few months, we have seen series of discussions and concrete steps which have been taken by the government. For example, the draft Cafe 3 norms, which
Right.
is yet to be rolled out. The draft Cafe 3 norms clearly specifies and gives the kind of recognition what the biofuel vehicles require, specifically
Correct. Yeah.
giving them the super credit. So I
Super
believe
credits. That's right.
rolling out of Cafe 3 norms will definitely help the OEMs to roll out the vehicle. That's number one. Even the net zero report, which was recently published by Niti Aayog, clearly recognizes flex fuel vehicle as a clean pathway engine going forward. So that is again a recognition by the highest body, a planning commission, Niti Aayog, for the government. Having said that, very rightly, we have been discussing about it for quite a long time. The policies have to come in, specifically on the GST rationalization, on making the E100 fuel cheaper. Then only the flex fuel engine can be really successful in the country. On
Right.
the E20, which you just said, see, last year, whatever happened in the social media, I believe it had no really technical backup. It was a hearsay. This was more of a misinformation campaign, I believe,
But Mr.
because
Balani, we've tested vehicles, to be honest. Let's the wear and tear, of course, that can be anecdotal. We'll see that over time, over 2 years we'll get. But we have tested vehicles, Mr. Balani, and there is a genuine drop in mileage, and people are feeling this as well. So my submission is, you go to E27, there'll probably be more. My point is, do you think we should, let's say, hold on to base E20 for a while and let the flex fuels come for E85, E100 or whatever? Because that, as I said, will be kind of, meet everyone's concern. Now, suddenly again jumping to E27, most of the manufacturers are material compliant, but calibration will have to be redone. It's a huge cost for the industry and then eventually the consumer. So I think a little thought should be given even for the consumer in this regard.
uh, I believe what we are, I don't think we should be able to directly jump to E27.
Right.
We very rightly said there is a little bit of energy efficiency loss in terms of mileage, but I believe that could be compensated by, because a lot of times the mileage efficiency goes down, very well, is also because of how you maintain the car.
Right.
The entire mileage efficiency loss cannot be really attributed to ethanol. There will be a minor drop, but that minor drop could be compensated by a better maintenance, or perhaps you should see a larger picture how it is benefiting the country. Having said that, at least what we can perhaps do is we can go to at least 22 and not 27 directly. See, even I mean, from 20 to 22 should not be a problem. And this is where what we have seen in Brazil, the cars which were basically E20 compliant were able to take 20 to 25 very easily. There are scientific evidence. I think there are some tests which have been done by ARAI also. So I'm not really asking that the transition has to be directly from E22 to E27. There can be a calibrated transition from E20 to E22. It stabilizes, then you can think of going to 25 and then beyond. So there has to be some thinking calibrated so that nobody gets into a disadvantageous position. The consumers are taken care of, the OEMs are taken care of, and the industries are taken care of. I believe there has to be a calibrated ecosystem where we can actually calibrate and go gradually up from 20 to 22.
Right. So what you're saying is we can go immediately to 22. Again, I think, consumers, I'll be honest, even these, as it is, I think we're on the edge. We've done some tests. We've seen tests where the content is 20.5 right now, because obviously it varies. So really a lot of the OMC is pushing the ethanol content to the maximum. But again, but let's focus on how this will impact the consumption, because clearly you want the consumption of ethanol to go up. for various reasons. Overall, it could be cheaper given the way the oil prices have gone up, your capacity issues. Any, back of the calculation, E20 to 22, how much would that increase capacity? And how do you see flex fuel vehicles really actually the E85s and upwards mopping up most of the capacity? Because I think that's the way it should be. Then, as I said, because that volume running on almost entirely on ethanol of newer vehicles would really kind of mop up the capacity the best.
Absolutely. See, graduating from E20 to E22 will immediately add up or utilization of my additional capacity of 150 crore liter, given the fact that 20% the consumption of ethanol is around 1,100 crore liter. So it will add up
Got it.
another 150 crore liter, which definitely will help the industry and the farmers, because then we will be able to pay to the farmers more. That's number one. Number two, the flex fuel vehicle, for example, if it gets rolled out, the flex fuel vehicle, and considering that we have a differential pricing and the customer sees an advantage, there could be a substantial number of both two-wheelers and four-wheelers flex fuel vehicle could be rolled out. Substantial
Right.
consumption will start coming out. The increase in the consumption will not be very significant in the first and second year, because I don't think it will take off suddenly. It
Right.
will again be a gradually, only some portion of the new vehicles will be flex fuel vehicles. So there the consumption will gradually go up. But eventually, for example, how Brazil did, today 90% of their fleet is flex fuel vehicle, and their average blending is almost 55%. Even the blaze blending stays at 27%. So if we have both flex fuel vehicle and a base, uh, whatever the government decide, we can see that in next few years we can reach to approximately 40 to 50% average blending, which is definitely going to cut my import dependence on the crude.
Right. So, Mr. Ballani, I think what our, let's say, our audience would really like to know. Big concern that we get a lot of queries, should I buy petrol? They're going to increase the blending. What do you see is, what do you forecast? I mean, when do you think we will go from E20 to E22? Obviously, you all are pushing for it. There is a pushback from the auto industry. Auto industry didn't even want you to do E20. They want to keep E10, but they were bulldozed into giving E20. Now, we managed with that. But what do you see as a forecast, and what are you hearing from the government of, let's say, I'm just only talking base fuel, E20, E22, E27. What do you think is a timeline in your estimate?
Very, very difficult to give the timeline, because our job is only to push this and also give comfort to the consumer that there's absolutely nothing to worry if the blending goes from 20 to 22%. Absolutely no problem in the engine. We will try and convince the government, the regulators, to go beyond E20, because that is where we will have to also see the national interest in the mind, because we are all seeing what is happening now, because of this situation, and this situation can come up anytime. So we have to see how we really depend on
Right,
our own resources. So no
right.
timeline, but we will keep on making that effort on going beyond E20. But again, to all your consumers and viewers, you don't have to really worry about the problem because of the higher blend, because that would be taken care of.
Right. Well, Mr. Balani, I don't know whether they would, let's say, resonate with that. To be honest, we've seen the backlash. Just one thought: what are the auto industry saying? I mean, you've been talking to them as well, because for them it's a lot of work, it's a lot of cost, because recalibration is the main issue. See, the material compatibility is not as big an issue. It's the recalibration to make it run well on the higher ethanol blend. So because otherwise the engines are not optimized, that's where the fuel efficiency drops as a result. And what we are forgetting, honestly, is the huge older vehicle park, which really gets impacted the most. And people with the older vehicles. So it's just keeping this in mind, and I can clearly see your interests are to have more blending, of course, because you all also have an issue. So it is a bit of a we are in a bit of a pickle, actually, so to speak, with all this happening.
See, again, there are multiple solutions. For example, when we talk about flex fuel vehicle, now for the older vehicle, I'll just give you example. A couple of years back, we did a test with a flex fuel kit. So there was a kit which was produced by a company. I don't remember which country was that, but we gave this assignment to IIT Delhi. They did a proper testing with a flexible kit. So this kit is not a very expensive kit, a very cheap kit, which can be perhaps retrofitted with the existing old vehicle. And that particular vehicle can take anything from E0 to E100. So we will have to come out with such solutions where the older vehicle could take care of, they can be taken care of by using such technologies. Having said that, uh, older vehicle, for example, in any case after 2023, all the vehicles which are being sold are already E20 compliant. So for those vehicles, graduating from E20 to 22, 25 should not be a problem because they can take higher blend. And it is, we've seen how it has worked in Brazil. The older vehicles which were already E10 compliant, for example, before 2023, can take 20%, which has seen, we have not seen any substantial problem in the engine. The engines have not given a problem. So there is a very large test base already, and there is no substantial reason why anybody should get worried about any problem in the engine. So for those also, perhaps the tests have suggested that graduating from 20 to 22% immediately at least will not have any negative effect on the engine. So we should not really think too much about it. I think 20 to 20% is something which is doable without a much big problem. And that is something which we can go beyond. Beyond it, we can see how we can have a better recalibration of the engine.
So what you're saying is, what I'm getting, E22 is going to come sooner than we think, or it can be around the corner.
I'm not saying anything. We are only saying that we are trying to push this. We are trying to convince the regulators that
Right.
22 is something which is doable in immediate future. And this will not have any problem with the engine. Mileage efficiency will not see a larger drop. So I'm just saying that this could be a pathway which could be taken specifically at this time when we are so much of depending on the crude. This is a homegrown solution. We have to ultimately become Atmanirbhar. We have to depend on our own fuel. That is what I am saying. I am not saying it has to be done or it will be done. When it will be done, I don't know.
Okay, great. And so just one last thing which I want to press you on is, the fuel efficiency, let's say, impact. Now, we've tested vehicles, and I think we've done it quite well, E10 to E20. In fact, we used E10 fuel and on the same cycle use E20 fuel, depending on the vehicle. Older vehicles sometimes not calibrated as much as a 12% impact. Don't you think at least some benefit should be given in the price of the fuel? I mean, even at E22, I mean, E10 to E22 is the jump, which is quite large. I think, that at least because everyone today, I'll be honest, is complaining about a lower efficiency from what they were getting. The wear and tear that, of course, in on paper can happen. We have to see what it is, and we are also testing vehicles, and we will know, but over a period of time, what that wear is. But the fuel efficiency impact is immediate, and we've seen it, we've tested it. So I mean, I think at least some sort of compensation by way of price is one way of at least lessening the impact to the poor consumer.
See, what we have tested, definitely, I completely, I don't say that whatever 10%, 12% is something which you have tested is wrong. But what we did the testing, we also did our own testing. Even I've seen the ARAI report and the press conference which was done by ARAI with all the OEMs, where they, I believe, said that the mileage drop is around 5 to 6%. And that is also on the component of 20% ethanol. So overall, if you see the impact of that 6% because of the 20% ethanol on rest 80%, which is actually the 100% fuel, comes down to around 2 to 3%, which is not very substantial in terms of drop. This drop could also be because of how you drive the vehicle, how you maintain the vehicle, your engine oil. So better. So I believe some of it could be compensated by certain more better calibration in the engine or a tuning of the engine. But yes, for E100 or E85, definitely, as I said, there has to be a compensation for the loss of efficiency because there we are looking at almost 93% of ethanol or 100% of ethanol. There the drop is going to be substantial. So that is where we are looking at a substantial differential pricing. But for E20 or going beyond to E22, I don't see much of a difference there.
Right. And you've been talking about the government, you've been pushing them. You must have had discussion with the auto manufacturers. I mean, how do you see their response to this? I mean, clearly it's a lot of hard work for them as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we are in discussion with almost all the OEMs. We are also in discussion with SIAM, ECMA, and we are trying to see how we can really come on the same page. There are definitely concerns from their side, which
Actually,
collectively we will have to try and resolve so that we come on the same page and have a, a pathway which is, as I said, beneficial for our own consumers, our own country. So definitely we'll keep on working them and see how we can really come on the same page and agree on the pathway which we have to take as far as the surface mobility and specifically the blending is concerned.
right. No, thanks, Mr. Balani, for a very frank conversation. But just to sum up, do you see 2026 a real inflection point because of two things have happened? One is you're saddled with some 50% overcapacity, and obviously, you need to use that. All the investments have been made, and with the war in Iran, the crude prices have really gone through the roof. Do you think this is going to, in a way, accelerate the adoption of ethanol going forward? And do you think things might happen? Going up the blending ladder might happen faster than anticipated.
Definitely, yes. At least this crisis has made us realize that something which we have is can be used to reduce the import dependence. And the way our Honorable Prime Minister has also highlighted this in the Parliament, because of the 20% blending, we were able to, or we at least almost 4.5 crore barrel of crude was not imported. So definitely there is more recognition of this ecosystem, the ethanol ecosystem today, specifically during this crisis. And I believe the government is looking at how to really increase the consumption of ethanol, definitely which are viable pathways and how to reduce the dependence. So we are definitely hopeful that looking at all the scenarios, our capacities today, how to mitigate the crisis in future, and also how to really have more rural prosperity because of this, government will definitely in 2026 take some concrete steps to increase the consumption of ethanol.
And obviously, you ended with talking about rural prosperity. So I think clearly, I think one of I think the base cost is, which really then cascades, is the feedstock cost. I think slightly, I mean, it is on the higher side. That's very clear. And obviously, that impacts your costs as well because you have to add the margins over there. Do you see any flexibility on the feedstock costs? Because, there's a direct impact. One, you're benefiting the agri industry, the farmers, and on the other side, you're benefiting, let's say, consumers, which are, or the mobility sector.
As I said, the feedstock prices are decided by the government. Definitely, this program, the major advantage of this program is that the farmers have benefited immensely, and
Right.
we've seen how much income has been, for example, has been enhanced for the farmers because of this entire program. And there is something which is doable. I mean, the prices of feedstock has to be given to the farmer, and that
Right.
perhaps is also directly connected to the cost of cultivation.
Right.
So the government has to look at everything and then decide on the pricing. So
Right.
we should really, I mean, we have to look at everything, including the feedstock pricing. But we as an industry feel that the program benefit has to go to farmer because a lot of work has to be done for us to see that there is prosperity at the rural level. And that is where the India will grow.
Right.
And if this program contribute to that particular advantage, or at least that objective of the government, I believe it is a very good program and we should try and enhance it.
Right. Thanks, Mr. Balani. On that, I think clearly I will end by saying that, this program, as you said, has really benefited the farmer most. I will also add that it has come, to be honest, to some cost to the consumer of, let's say vehicles. But I think clearly, I think we've also seen the benefits of E20. And, I think clearly we are on our path. I mean, you've got so much capacity right now, it has to be used. So, well, the only, let's say, way for the blending to go is up. And I think we all need to be geared and prepared for that. But really, thank you very much for your insights. Real pleasure talking to you. and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very nice talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.